Well, I'm part of the 9%. I'm a woman, I'm an engineer, I'm not British even, which in this audience is probably even rarer. And I'm also an alumni of the course. And on top of that, I'm here to represent kind of Arup's role in the creation of the course. I'm kind of wearing all sorts of hats. And of course, I got a bit worried about all these hats. And speaking in my name, or in the name of Arup, or in the name of the course. So basically, I've decided to kind of do what I normally do, which is to decide what I was going to say, and then all the other people will have to decide whether which company or which part of the world I'm talking for. I did contact a whole number of alumni of the course within Arup in preparation for this, and got quite a lot of good ideas and good feedback, which oriented slightly what I'm telling you. So clearly, we're here partly because of this man of Arup. He's probably one of the few people who's written absolutely important texts about interdisciplinary design, about interdisciplinary collaborations, about all these issues. He's probably written the key text for this. However, in a way, he probably wrote them in the 70s, or some of them in the 70s. We're now in 2014, and it's interesting to reread those texts and to see where things have moved on or not. When Ove died in '89, Arup decided to create the Arup Foundation, and it was established in March '89. They followed on trying to decide what it is they were going to do at the time. They had this famous Madingley seminar, which had a great deal of luminaries. I tried to read some of the proceedings of this in preparation for today, and kind of gave up because it's such a thick book, but it is available on the system. And it resulted in the foundation deciding to try and push for a course. And I'll show you in a minute one quote about what they were expecting the course to do. So they called for an expression of interest to create this course. That actually, in a way, is very interesting. Normally, where I come from, education comes from the state. It gets decided from the states. People will not imagine of creating a course sort of from scratch, from private money, and so on. So that's actually the process by which the course came to be is actually quite interesting. And it did come to be, and it came to be in Cambridge, which was very fitting because I think Arup and Cambridge have had long-standing relationships, and that was an excellent sort of place for this. I was on cohort 2, so pretty early on. I think the course at the time was probably still inventing itself, which in a way was perfect, and was sort of delight to be part of that. I actually remember my arrival here in this exact very same room, looking at the people in September '95, and sort of thinking, my God, I spent 2 years with them now. And it was interesting because we were from such different places. Diversity in the sense of Sunan was already there, I think, in the course. And I was one of those people. There's been a few key moments after that in the next few years of the course, and notably the sort of seminar at Emmanuel's College in '97, where some of us, and interestingly I was asked to talk at that one as well, had tried to put our thoughts together about what it is we were doing, what it is that we thought, and so on. That's one of the sentences of the letter sent by the Arup Foundation to the various organizations they had chosen to try and bid for the course. And I think it's interesting because it tells you what the intent of the course was at the time, but also it had another sentence which I think is relevant to the topic of disciplines and separation and so on. And it still decided that the best, what they call total formal education, was served best by individual discipline undergraduate courses then supplemented by a master's course. So they were not advocating a sort of very generalist course, which would have all the disciplines together at undergraduate level. But they were still recognizing the power of the disciplines, the importance of the disciplines, and their role into what we were doing. And I think that's actually quite an important decision at the time. So that was in that letter. So that question, increasingly interdisciplinary, increasingly diverse. Of course, I didn't go off a tangent quite as drastically as Sunan on that one, and stuck more to the sort of meaning of diversity in terms of disciplines. And that's a list which is probably 5 or 6 years ago of specializations within Arab, things you can get. And that's actually probably too short now and probably would cover 2 pages. So that gives you a bit of an idea. I'm in this red circle, structure building, but that gives you a bit of an idea that the sort of split, the explosion of knowledge, the explosion of disciplines is definitely ongoing. I thought, in preparation for this, I would just list the participants of one of my last projects, design team. And that's even before you bring in the contractors and all what they bring to the project. So I think one can say pretty strongly that diversity is increasing, or discipline numbers is increasing, specialism is increasing, and that move is definitely ongoing. There might even be some financial reasons for that, as some of my colleagues suggested that might be a way to get more money out of clients, and that might actually be true. But there's also a sort of complexity of what we do, complexity of buildings, which means that there is more knowledge to absorb, and every time there's a lot more knowledge or a lot more modeling to do or a lot more ideas to have, you suddenly find that there's somebody who's going to specialize in that, and then it slowly takes momentum and sort of happens. Facade engineering, for example, was in its very infancy when I was at IDBE. It was hardly a discipline. Now it's a really well-established one, but there's several others on this list that are definitely now. And that is a standard list. The client's not reacting when he's told, I need this, you need to appoint all these people. They're not reacting against it. They expect sort of do this. So that's quite a long way. There's more bubbles, I think, than in Sunan's diagram. Why are we doing this, though? Because that whole discussion about interdisciplinarity and the need for coordination and so on has to have a higher purpose. And in a way, it's probably to avoid this. It's to avoid that kind of sort of hamburger of layers, of pieces, which have been put together sort of not very well, and sort of each discipline didn't talk enough about what they were doing to even get to the point where they'd agreed how to integrate them. I like showing one of my projects on that one, which is the Millennium Bridge, but if you look at the way the lighting and the decking and everything on the Millennium Bridge is put together, that is probably, for me, one of the best examples of interdisciplinary design I've been involved with. What happened in the last 20 years? Well, that is really where I'm going to get shot by probably half of you. But I had a go at sort of some of the key points that I felt. So more discipline split, that's for sure. Emergence of the PM role, and actually probably not even emergence, now it's well established, probably at the expense of the architect's role. And that is something which is not necessarily true in every country, but certainly is in this one. Larger integrated consultants, Sunan has mentioned a few. BIM, that famous word, that actually, interestingly, the first time I heard about BIM was in IDBE. So 20 years ago, in IDBE, people were discussing what it could do, what its aim could be, and it's taken 20 years to get to more or less where it is, which is probably not that far. That's on my name, not Arab. and sort of But it is where I think I heard about it the first few times. Design and build, the role of the contractor, becoming all sort of more powerful. Sustainability has happened up to a point. It's been a little, often too much equated with energy efficiency. And I think that's probably one of the limitations of why sustainability is not necessarily going where we'd like it to be, is that it's often too limited in its aims, possibly. Shrinking budgets and program, I mean, the economic crisis is possibly just over, but has been an absolute key to what is happening at the moment. Rebounds of industrialization of the industry is one that I think is also happening. I mean, there's an absolute obvious desire of some of the contractors to industrialize the process. Some for good reason, some for possibly slightly less good reason. And unfortunately, probably a reduced focus on architecture, which can't be very good. When we were preparing this talk, we sort of spoke with people of the Arab Foundation, just because I felt I needed to understand where they stood now. And it's clear that the Arab Foundation has now taken a lot more momentum, is running more initiatives, more courses, other courses than IDBE, and IDBE is flying of its own wings. But one of the key questions that came out of that conversation is, interdisciplinary is good, but what is the higher purpose? And I think the higher purpose is the probably all-important question. That was the higher purpose of OVE, to produce good architecture. And that was probably one of the key elements of IDBE at the early days as well. There was definitely a great focus on architecture. I'm not sure this is now the higher purpose. I'm not sure, and although I really believe it should be, or it should be one of those, but it's what is the higher purpose we're doing all this for now? And I think we may have to answer that question. I went back to reading what I wrote at the Emmanuel sort of talk at the time, and very much the same sort of idea, a focus on design, and a focus that actually the shared aims and shared goals were the best way of actually arriving at interdisciplinarity, rather than very formalized, formal sort of organizational structures. I think I still think that, actually, for us. So, what happens next? What will happen? At industry level, actually a lot of those moves of the last 20 years, BIM, the one-stop shop companies or consultants, the design and build, all of these kind of evolutions are probably trying to tackle in their own way the issue of this kind of explosion of discipline and this explosion of complexity. I can very much imagine a non-experienced client faced with, you have to actually appoint these 20 groups of people. And I think that therefore some of the other reactions of the industry have been to try and offer a solution to those people which are much more sort of simple for them in a way. So interestingly, a lot of the moves that have occurred in the industry have related to this question of integration and collaboration, but possibly in still rather diverse way in a way. I think at individual level is probably where a lot of things also need to occur. And I couldn't resist showing you these three people, Peter Rice, Renzo Piano, and Richard Rogers a long time ago, which is probably the only example that I know of a truly interdisciplinary collaboration. And what I mean by that is not that they were collaborating properly, each one in their own disciplines, but actually they were coming up with ideas together, concepts together. They were not actually, Renzo was not just the architect and Peter was the engineer, and they would solve each other's problem, but they would actually work together at the very outset of the thing. And actually, it's much more rare than one thinks. It's almost unheard of. I've been in this industry for about 25 years. Don't even think it has happened to me more than once or twice. So I think that's that sort of dream that I had, in a way, that one of the reasons I joined the industry has not happened. And I think it's still worth pushing, because I think, in a way, we're depriving ourselves from a lot of benefits by each of us staying in our own little towers. Collaborating, well, yes, but staying in our own little towers. I think we do need generalists and integrators. Couldn't resist to put that slide, which is done by the contractor of one of my recent projects, where he had everybody's photos put on a board and say, all together we will succeed. And that is actually probably one of the best examples of collaborations I've had at all levels across the industry. Can process or tools suffice? Well, I think I share Sunan's view on that one. I don't think they will. They're only tools. They're only doing what we embed in them to do. And they don't solve the fact that we're all in various parts. We still have to have ways to talk to each other, ways to relate to each other and contribute. And also they come slightly too late, in my view, the tools. Industrialization or prefabrication being the answer, which is one of the models that is being discussed in some of the papers. Good question. I think we're going to get back to pretty much the same point about clients that was made earlier. I think shared purpose is key, and I think shared purpose may have to be agreed project by project. Not necessarily at sort of government level, although some of that may be necessary, but I think there's also project by project, much more low-key shared purpose. And it's quite rare that we have discussions about the purpose of a project with all the participants in our industry at the beginning. Not very often. You arrive, you talk structure, you talk MEP, whatever, but you never talk about the purpose and what you're trying to achieve. And I think that would be something we should do more. And that's what I will leave you with.